we meet again. I'd like to reminisce about something. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we started talking about the way the world is today and the way these self-proclaimed ulama, they like to throw their weight around as if what they have to say is of great importance. And then he was telling me about a certain pie chart someone had constructed, someone who has a master's degree in Islamic law, I think it is. And he sent me a picture of this pie chart, and it was quite interesting because this man had divided the contents of the entire Qur'an into categories. And he listed down these categories in his pie chart along with a percentage of how much of the Qur'an was dedicated to this particular category. So let me give you an example. On belief, the Qur'an dedicates 22% of its contents to belief. On the community, it dedicates 14% of its contents to community. On character, in other words, Akhlak, the Qur'an dedicates 13% of its contents towards the question of Akhlak. And then to tamthil, to analogy, to stories, another 11%. To affirmation and admonition, another 11%, and so on and so forth. This is how he categorized the contents, the entire contents of the Qur'an. Now, let's be quite clear here in the beginning that we are not saying that we think it's a great thing that we have a percentage of what the Qur'an contains. No. Even if it is 0.0001 of a percentage, it is still something that is true. It is still revealed knowledge. It is still something good because it's in the Qur'an. What I find interesting was how much he had classified the law, Islamic law, or Sharia law. What percentage of the Qur'an is dedicated to that? According to this pie chart, 7% is dedicated to the Sharia law. Now, out of that 7%, 65 of that 7% on Sharia law is non-judicable elements, such as purity, prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, food and drink, and oaths. Now that's 65% of that 5%, of that 7% dedicated to Islamic law. Now this 65% is non-judicable, which means it's not something that you can take someone to court with and charge them over. Interestingly enough, food and drink is mentioned as one of them. Then 20% is to contracts, partnership, and endowments. In other words, this is having to do with the law of transaction. And then another 10% is dedicated to family, like custody, marriage, divorce, probate, and so on and so forth. Now, a mere 5%, now we're talking about 5% of the 7%. 5% is reserved to discuss adjudication, the penal code, in other words, the hudud, and international relations. Now, these kind of things, it's classified as criminal law. But strangely enough, these are not things which are strictly law per se. They might be something that is taken from the works of the ulama, from his devotion, something that is derived, not directly taken from the Qur'an. If it was directly taken from the Qur'an, this 7% that accounts for Islamic law, if it is directly derived, not directly taken, but directly derived from the Qur'an, it only amounts to 2.4% of the entire Qur'an. Of that 2.4%, if it has to do with the hudud, In other words, the penal code. Only 0.3% of it is derived from the Qur'an. Now that is quite an interesting figure. I use these figures just to make a point, what I'm about to say here. Look at the scholars of the past. These are real scholars, not the kind that have been self-appointed or anointed by political favor or by political opportunism. These are actual scholars, real people who have real knowledge of truth and justice. People like Al-Ghazzali, for instance. Look at Al-Ghazali's magnum opus, the Revivification of the religious sciences, what they call in Arabic the Iḥyā Ulūm. He begins on knowledge. He begins on Iman. He begins on all those things which have a large reservation of material in the Qur'an itself. Just now I mentioned the fact that Iman occupies 22% of the entire Qur'an, questions about Iman, followed by questions regarding community, followed that by questions regarding what was the other one? The 13% just now was having to do with sorry. Oh, hold on 1 second, please. With character, with akhlak. That is a huge dedication of the contents of the Qur'an towards the question of matters concerning akhlak or character, good character. How is it, therefore, that these self-appointed and government-appointed and politically opportunistic appointed so-called ulamas dedicate the entire understanding to law, or to what they call the Sharia law, and of that they dedicate a heavy proportion and prioritize the hudud? It's ridiculous. We've already shown just now that the penal code itself, out of that 7% of the entire contents of the Qur'an, which is dedicated to law, out of that 7%, only a mere 5% is dedicated to either hudud and those other two things I mentioned earlier. But it's a very small percentage. Now, as I said, doesn't mean that just because it's a small percentage it's not important or it's not good. That's not what we are saying. What we are saying is that the Qur'an prioritizes certain things. Therefore, rather than prioritize things which the Qur'an does not prioritize, we should be prioritizing those things the Qur'an prioritizes, namely the question of Iman. Secondly, the question of community, Masyarakat. Thirdly, the question of Akhlak, character, ethics, morality. These are things which people like Al-Ghazali emphasized greatly in his Iḥyā Ulūm. And this is one of the reasons why his magnum opus is still relevant today, 1,000 years after his death. We are still studying it, we are still reading it, and yet those ulama, those false ulama, they are not doing that. They are emphasizing things which are really not emphasized heavily in the Qur'an. What about the question of Iman here? That one hadith narrated by Abu Dawood, that he says the lowest form of Iman, the lowest form of Iman is to remove a dangerous obstacle from your path. That is the lowest form of Iman. A lot of people think that what they mean really is, again, they give a tafsir without having the right knowledge. They think that it means that if you see something on the road that is going to hinder you, you just push it to the side. Well, I mean, that's maybe one of its meanings. But a more important meaning, and remember please, this is the lowest form of Iman. One more important than that is, if there is danger in your midst, you should remove that danger. You should be the one who causes that danger to be removed. Whether it be medical, to do with medical, if there is a danger to do with something in the medical field, something in the disease, something in the environment, you should remove that. And that's the lowest form of Iman. And even that we are not doing. On the contrary, we are actually making the hindrance. We are putting the hindrance. We are placing danger in front of us. And who is this we that is placing danger in front of us? It's the kind of government that knows not and knows not they know not. Arrogance. Refusing to admit that they don't know. These are the people who are placing importance on things which have really no importance. No priority, not to say no importance, but no priority. The admonitions and the advice in the Qur'an, another 11% was devoted to admonition, 11% was devoted to advice. All the nasihah, all the tamthil, all the stories in the Qur'an, they have much more significant priority compared to the hudud, which only represents a small proportion of the law, of Islamic law, of the Sharia law. A very small proportion. It only represents 5% of the entire 7% content of the Qur'an. Think about that. As a Muslim, think about that. Think about these people who you call ulama, who you call murshid, who you call ustad. Think about that. The fact that they are not prioritizing what needs to be prioritized. The question of justice. That is the biggest priority. How do you arrive at this justice? You must have knowledge. But we've already said before that you are the one corrupting this knowledge. You are the one now, we can see very clearly, that you are emphasizing something which has no priority. You are corrupting knowledge. As a result, justice goes unserved. Justice is denied because of your ignorance, because the fact that you have corrupted knowledge. Please, think about this. Think about what we have said in this video today. I'm not asking you to make your own judgment, because I know you cannot perhaps make your own judgment, but we are saying, we are explaining in the clearest way possible. Think about this in terms of the priorities. Look at the ulama in the past, how they have contributed greatly to the Muslim civilization. Why the Muslim civilization has now fallen, has now collapsed. We are no longer civilized, precisely because we have forgotten where our priorities lie. Thank you.